weekend. We're also going to talk a little bit about PFL, aka the Professional Fighters League, which actually debuts tonight from the theater at Madison Square Garden. And we're also going to preview the big pay-per-view event happening this weekend in UFC 225. Again, that's this weekend from Chicago at the United Center. Super excited for that. 2 title fights for that pay-per-view this Saturday, with the main event being the middleweight championship of the world, as Yoel Romero will once again try to defeat Robert Whittaker, again with the middleweight championship on the line. The last time, of course, the interim middleweight championship was on the line. Once again, I am your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. We're coming to you live on MMA World. That's facebook.com/MMA World with 2 extra Ds. And thanks again for joining me here live. And like the page as always, or our sister page, that's facebook.com/Mixed Martial Arts UK. And also on Twitter at We Are MMA UK, as well as Instagram. So without further ado, let me bring in my co-host here. 1 second. All right. Kayla, to start this week's live Beyond the Cage. And of course, Miles Painter will be joining us as well in the comments section, helping us patrol that section. And how's it going today, Kayla?
Hey, Jim. Hey, Miles. I saw that Miles has already joined us. It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Looking forward to this week's show. Of course, we got a lot to talk about. Obviously, some big events going on. Obviously, the biggest being UFC 225. It feels as though we've been waiting a while to see 225, and finally, it's this weekend.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Like most people, I feel like it's definitely the most stacked card.
Yeah, a lot of great fights, not just the pay-per-view main card. The preliminary fights on FS1 as well as Fight Pass have a lot of big, notable names as well. So this is a card that is definitely worth tuning in for from start to finish.
How are you going to watch it?
I think as of right now, the plan is to watch it at a local bar and or grill in my area, at least to catch the main card. And then usually I watch the preliminary fights at a later date. I have some other obligations beforehand, so I probably won't be able to watch the preliminary fights live, but I get to them eventually.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. Plus, it works out for me. I don't know how everyone is. Some people, like, they have to watch certain things live. For me, most fight nights, most preliminary things, I either don't watch live or I watch like an hour or 2 delay, just to sift through commercials, because I can't take them.
Yeah.
And
they play the same ones over and over again.
Right, and this is something that a lot of people talked about, the pacing of fights. Would that change heading to a new network with ESPN and ESPN Plus? And as of right now, it doesn't look like there's any immediate plans to change up how they pace things. And I think that's a mistake. The reason it's a mistake is because what other sporting event in America, Kayla, would you go to? And for you to watch the whole thing, you have to be there for like 7 hours. Do you know of another sporting event that's like that long?
No, I really don't. I mean, I think that, to me, basketball games seem like they take a while sometimes, but
not
I guess
7 hours. That's like
not
3. You could almost get 3 games in 7 hours.
Well,
maybe not an NBA Finals game, because they do longer breaks. But I mean a normal regular season game. But yeah, and I think that's something I wish they would change. You would figure with obviously 2 now digital networks that they're going to be part of, UFC's own digital network and Fight Pass, and ESPN Plus. Again, if they were able to show all the preliminary fights on one of those 2 digital networks, there wouldn't be commercials. You could just go through them, and then when the main card hits on ESPN, I understand commercials. That's fine, but that would speed everything up. Again, when you're at home and you can take your time watching it and you can fast forward for the commercials, it's great. Who cares, right? But when you're watching live, or you're obviously in there, sitting there, you're like, oh man, could the next fight just start? Sometimes you do get that way. And it's unfortunate because no one should, people can say, oh, we don't have to show up for the whole thing. But if you're paying good money to go see a fight, how are you not going to like see the whole thing? How could you in good conscience, if you're paying, let's say you pay cage side seat, right? Now for pay-per-view, it's more, but most like fight nights, it's usually somewhere between like 100, 175. This weekend's pay-per-view, it's probably closer to 300. Again, that's face value, not aftermarket price or anything. But if you're paying that much money, how would you only just show up for like the main card or the 6 or 7 fights? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's always confused me when people do that, but we're also big fight fans, so
I mean, if you're a big celebrity, $300 is nothing to you. I get that, but when you're like a regular person, I don't. You spend all that time driving downtown, paying for parking. You probably ate dinner somewhere beforehand. Gas up the car. All of that stuff.
Get your money's worth.
I know, that's what I say.
One thing before are we starting with UFC Utica?
Yes, that's where I wanted to start.
So one thing I wanted to bring up and I wanted to talk about is how it was the lowest primetime fight night, lowest views is what I read. And I thought that was interesting because like you said, they're making that transition into this new platform. And, they've been saying over the last, I don't know, year or so, just viewings and everything, maybe because of the commercials, who knows? They're just very low. So I find that interesting that each fight night has lower and lower views or is breaking records, but not good records.
Right.
And kind of just, I guess, solidifies why they've decided to make these changes or think about putting it on some other platform.
Well, obviously, number one, it was on a Friday night, which is historically of days of the week is usually the lowest rated time slot, Friday evenings, because everybody has stuff going on. Also, it's the summer. Summer ratings are usually lower than fall ratings because it's nice outside. People are doing things, especially where that event took place in Utica, New York, which is probably gets more snow than here in Detroit. So obviously, if it's a nice day, you're going to go out and enjoy it. And I think 3, it wasn't really that huge of a card as far as names go. I mean, the main event sure was a great main event. 2 guys in the top 5 of their division, but not huge household names. Jimmy Rivera and Marlon Moraes are not household names. And you look at the other fights on the card, realistically, the most notable guys were probably the first fight of the night, Sam Alvey and Gian Vellante, in terms of the main card. Everybody else were relatively unknown guys. And girls, I forgot Lauren Murphy and Sarge Eubank were on there too on the undercard. But it's not like huge names were on take some of the names off the undercard from 225, put them on UFC Utica. That's instantly like 10 times better, more appealing card to people.
But the second lowest of the year was the fight night before that, Thompson and Till. So
that one was during a holiday weekend at 3 p.m. You know what I mean? I would say a lot of Americans, if they were on holiday at 3 p.m, that's when it's nice out. They weren't going to stay inside and watch the fight.
Yeah, I guess.
And also, typically fights are on Saturday. You look at weird times, people kind of associate Saturday with the UFC. And both those fights were not on a Saturday. And I think also that has something to do with it, too. Because people aren't in that mindset, Friday night, UFC. Sunday afternoon, UFC. So I think that hurts live viewing ratings, too. Because if you're kind of a casual fan, if you know, hey, Saturday night, I know to tune on FS1, I probably will see a fight. But if you're not that plugged in, you could easily miss the Friday night and the Sunday afternoon if you're not really paying that close attention.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's get to the fights at hand. As I mentioned real quickly on the undercard, unfortunately, my main man training right here in Detroit, Jared Brooks, was looking good, but then went in for a attempt big slam there, the first fight of the night. Kind of got topsy-turvy there, Kayla, and ended up knocking himself out. Of course, Torres kind of turned the corner, hit him with a few before the referee actually came in and called it. But the cause of it was Brooks slamming on his own head, and you really see it good on that reverse angle, that second angle where you can kind of see Torres is kind of like on this side, and Brooks' head is on this side, and when they come down, you just see his head kind of go gadoosh off the canvas there. And it's unfortunate because that's, I think, the best Jared Brooks has looked so far in the UFC. And, you know, he ends up getting himself knocked out. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, wild things happen, and that was definitely, I think, the more shocking fight of the night or finish of the night. I don't love how he's handled the situation of the tweets that he's deleting and putting back up after, but I don't know. It must be a hard pill to swallow when you were winning the fight in most people's eyes and then knock yourself out. That sucks.
Well, I think it's because the first tweet or Facebook post or whatever he put out, the way it was inferred was that it was like 9 out of 10 times I would beat you. The only way you could beat me, you know, you only beat me because I knocked myself out. So people were saying that infers that the only way that Torres could beat him is if he knocks himself out. That's what a lot of people were getting from the infers, not just simply the one time he'd get lucky with a punch or something like that. So I think that's one of the reasons why he kind of misspoke a little bit. I get the sentiment he was saying. But I think that's, you know, I think he took it all in stride, but I think he was just trying to still sound tough because everyone has to be honest with themselves. He was winning that fight up until that point. To me, there's not a doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure. But we'll see. I mean, if anything, people will remember him, and hopefully he can come back. Like you said, he looked really good, so I'm sure he'll be excited just to get back in there and rebound from it.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a young guy. I mean, he's only fought 3 times in the UFC. His overall record's now 1-2, losing his last 2. But this one, he did look good. I mean, he'll obviously probably get another chance in the UFC. I don't see him getting cut. And I think because, even though unfortunate as this incident was, I think a lot of people are actually going to pay attention to what he's going to do next because it's, was this the guy that knocked himself out? So hopefully he can turn that negative into a positive.
Yeah, sometimes it can, you know.
Let's see, we have a hi from Ray. Thanks for checking in, Ray. Appreciate it.
Hey, Ray.
Also, I got to give a shout out to Nathaniel Wood. He was getting pieced up by Johnny Eduardo, and he comes back and hits that Darce choke. Very impressive kid in his UFC debut against a longtime veteran in Johnny Eduardo, who's beaten some very quality guys in his career. Guy hits really hard, and he was able to come back and get that Darce choke. So I thought that was very impressive. Also, gotta give dap to Sijara Eubanks. Not only did she make weight, Kayla, which was a big deal, she beats Lauren Murphy, and I thought Def for sure took 2 of those 3 rounds, and I thought overall looked pretty good. Her conditioning looked good. Obviously, she showed off some ground skills. I was very impressed with Lauren Murphy off her back. I thought that was interesting. A lot better off her back than I thought she would be. It definitely was a close fight, but I did think Sarge won. Unfortunately, because of her missing weight at the Ultimate Fighter, and the fact Shevchenko probably should be the champion, you know, up a weight class, she probably has to take another fight because of that. But I think that's only right, considering that she couldn't even show up and fight Nico Montoya last December.
Yeah, and I think just to get a win in that division right now, I don't want to say it's locking you in, but because it's such a new division that they're building, because we kind of have been waiting a little bit with the champ, if you get a big win and because of her past on the show, I feel like she's locked in right there and, you know, at least a top 5, top 3 spot, if not the next #1 contender after. But I also was impressed with Lauren as well. You know, I'm very new to jiu-jitsu, but I've been learning a lot of moves off my back, and it was just fun to watch and see some skills from that position, I guess.
Yeah, especially when a lot of people associate the rubber guard with the 10th Planet system. And, of course, Lauren Murphy trains with the MMA lab, which is under John Crouch, which I'm not saying no one else can use rubber guard, but I'm just saying it's more. And I thought she was using the rubber guard great. I thought she was doing a great job of controlling the posture, not really allowing Sarge to really unload a lot of big shots. And she used it well. I think that's something I think she worked on in this camp, knowing how good at jiu-jitsu that Sarge Eubanks is, being a black belt herself, probably realized, you know what, I'm probably going to get taken down. I'm probably going to spend some time on my back. But if I can utilize the guard well, maybe I'll give her some pause, you know, to striking me or trying to pass me. And so that part of her game was solid. The stand-up, you would have liked to seen a little more activity, and I think sometimes I think one of the reasons lost, she spent too much time up against the cage with her back. I think those were the biggest two things that is why she didn't get the victory that night.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, first fight of the main card, Sam Alvey against Gian Villante. Very interesting fight. Obviously, Sam Alvey now fighting in his third weight class in association with the UFC. Of course, when he was on the Ultimate Fighter, that was the Shane Carwin, Roy Nelson season, I believe. He actually was a contestant at 170 pounds. Now all the way fighting at 205, his second time at this division for the UFC, taking on a guy who I think is a very legit 205-pound man in Gian Villante. And I'm kind of surprised that Sam was able to really hang with him, Kayla. I thought another 20 pounds up for Sam. I didn't think the power would translate as well. I didn't think he'd be able physically to hang in there with a guy like Gian, just because he is, I think, a very big, strong guy, and obviously a more athletic guy too. But his kind of, I hate to call it like lackadaisical, but he almost kind of like lulls you into the sleep the way he constantly kind of like backpedals. He doesn't put a lot out there. He's not like a physically opposing guy, but Sam Alvey just hits hard. And I think that kind of style kind of confused Villante. I don't think he really knew what to do, because Sam's not particularly a great wrestler. I really say great grappling, but you didn't really see Gian Villante really push the issue and try to get him up against the cage and really try for a takedown. In fact, if I look at the stats, I want to see if he even attempted a takedown. I want to say he didn't, but I don't know how the stats broke it down here. Let me see. No, officially, he didn't even try a takedown. I would have at least tried a takedown. You know what I mean? Just to mix it up, to give Sam that threat of trying to, stop you from punching him on top. And as far as striking goes, I always think Gian Villante, one of the biggest criticisms I have, even though he is a hard hitter, is that he can up the output, because I do feel he's that athletic. He has the endurance. And I felt at times he kind of held back a little bit. I think he was waiting too much for Sam to do something and was too worried about kind of chasing them and taking the center. Wasn't throwing enough. Even if they were half power shots, I think if he would have just stuck to like a jab leg kick combo, I think he could have been a little more successful, could have upped those numbers a little bit in terms of thrown strikes. And I think just something as simple as that may have gotten the win, because it was a close fight. You look at the stats. Alvey landed 59, Villante landed 50. Again, neither tried a takedown. And of total strikes thrown, Villante slightly ahead of Alvey, 133 to 128. So, I mean, super close fight. But the thing was, the harder, more impactful strikes were on Sam Alvey's end. You saw a couple times him kind of catch Villante off guard, especially with that left hand. And I think that's one of the reasons why the judges with him. There weren't enough strikes from Villante and enough impactful in strikes, I think, and that's why the judges didn't give him that nod in his home state.
Yeah, and it always is confusing when you know that it's a close fight. We knew by the second round it was super close, so you would think that, like you said, they would go into the third round with more activity. But Sam Alvey said in his post-fight speech that guy is one of the toughest guys he's fought. He was throwing everything at him. So it will be interesting, like you said, for him to fight other men at this weight class and see if, he still can knock people out and use his power, because he wasn't able to finish him.
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised. That's one of the reasons when I was picking these fights, I went with Gian Villante, because I wasn't sure if Sam could finish him. And then after the fight, he calls out Corey Anderson, which to me is a horrible matchup for Sam Alvey. I mean, that's not a good matchup at all. In my opinion, you have a guy that, sure, you can maybe say isn't as good as stand-up, but is a very tremendous wrestler and is very strong. And I don't know. Sam usually gets what he calls out if you look at kind of his track record. But this is the first time when Sam's called someone out, I was kind of like, really? That's who you want to fight next?
I mean, what's cool is I think he wants to challenge himself. I actually am pretty excited if I can get the night off next Friday. He and a couple of other fighters, along with comedians, are going to do a comedy show in Temecula, California. So I'm planning on going to that. Maybe he's just on this kick where he wants to challenge himself, try stand-up comedy, call out guys that would be more of a challenge in the octagon. Who knows?
Well, I've interviewed Sam many times over the years. He's a very nice guy. So if you get a chance to meet him, I mean, he's a very charismatic guy. he puts on a little bit of a show for the post, but legitimately, he's a very nice guy, and
And
I think he could do something
does
like
have
that.
a great smile.
No,
Every time that I've
he's
seen
always
him, like,
smiling. That is true. All right, next fight of the evening, Julio Arce, I believe is what they were calling him, against Daniel Tamar. Not surprised Arce got the win. Honestly, the elder Tamar brother, I haven't really been impressed with. David Tamar is fantastic. He's really good fighter. Obviously, he showed that on the undercard. And to be honest, I was kind of surprised they put Daniel on the main card and left David off the main card. I would have switched those two around. I don't know what Daniel has done to deserve that spot over his brother. Daniel's only fought once in the UFC, was on short notice, and he lost, and that was over a year ago. Yeah. So here the one thing I have against Daniel Tamar is I think he really probably should be fighting at 35. I really don't think he's that big of a featherweight. So I think size-wise, he's already at a disadvantage, and he definitely was in this fight. I mean, you saw how big Arce was. He was definitely taller and bigger than Daniel Tamar. And I think that's one of the things that he's going to struggle with if he continues to fight at 45, especially with guys in the UFC. And another thing in this one, I also think because of that layoff, he started to kind of gas out, I think, after that first round. I think he put a lot of energy. He threw a lot of output in that first round. I think you probably could have gave him the first round, but the second round he started to fade. I think Arce started to figure out the timing and the range, and I think that's noted by the amount of strikes that he threw heading into round two, where he threw 61 in round one, but then threw 91 in round two. So I really think he started to figure out, he really started to push the pace. And then in round three, again, I think Tamar started to look tired. I think Arce was really starting to hit his rhythm. And when even Daniel's no more for his like karate and kickboxing. So if it went to the ground, I think he was going to have a tough time dealing with those long legs and arms. And obviously Arce was able to kind of get on his back there and didn't look back, was able to sink in that rear naked choke at 225 there in the third round. And I thought for a guy's first fight post the Contender Series against a guy who, again, a little undersized for 145, but still a reputable guy, I wouldn't say a complete bum or anything. I thought he looked really good, and definitely a guy you got to keep your eye on. He's now 15-2 in his mixed martial arts career.
Yeah, what I'm always impressed with too is that, you know, like you said, in the second round or going into the second, it was pretty obvious that he was having a dominant performance, but he was looking for that opportunity for it to go to the ground. I think Tamar slipped and he went in to sink that finish and give a great performance. So definitely impressive. And there probably is some truth to that of Tamar trying to figure out where he should be in the UFC. I think Arce even said, like, leading up to the fight, there was a moment where I think Tamar, I didn't see it, but I watched the post-fight interview where, you know, I think he was trying to sell the fight and get in the guy's face, but then Arce said, I felt like he thought that they were going to split us up faster than they did, so then he just had to overcommit, and there was just hesitation there. It seems like he's kind of like just in a confused place, I guess,
Yeah.
of who he wants to be as a fighter, maybe what division, who knows, but hopefully he'll learn from this and figure out, you know, where he should fight at.
Yeah, and I think part of it is because his brother is having so much success. So he feels like, oh, I'm like just like my brother. How come I'm not beating guys? And so as much as he feeds off his brother, I think it kind of hurts too because his brother is having so much success now. What, 6-0 in the UFC? You know that, and now you're 0-2, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's with you.
All right, next fight of the evening: Jake Ellenberger against Ben Saunders. I'll admit, I thought Ellenberger had something left in the tank, Kayla, but I was proven horribly wrong in this one, as Ben Saunders was able to get into that clinch after it was a nice right by Ellenberger to get inside. He did hit Saunders, but once it got in the clinch, Ellenberger couldn't take him down quick enough to combat that liver shot knee that Saunders landed, and that pretty much crumpled the Nebraska native, and it went right to the canvas, and that was about it. Referee stepped in at 156 in round one for Ben Saunders to claim another victory in the UFC. And for Jake Ellenberger, this is a guy who, you know, after a very, you know, big rise in this sport, you know, winning 6 of his first 7 fights, beating the likes of Jake Shields, Diego Sanchez, Mike Pyle, and John Howard. really since that point in 2012 has only won 4 fights in the last 6 years, Kayla, including now 3 in a row and 5 out of his last 6. His 4 victories, he beat Jay Haran. Say Jay Haran was that was only by decision. He knocked out Marquardt, which even in 2003 Marquardt was starting on his decline. He beat another guy in the decline, and Josh Koscheck, and then another guy towards the end of his career as well, and Matt Brown. So and you can also say at the same token, well, he's lost to tough guys. Sure, he has lost to tough guys. I'm not going to disagree with that, but he hasn't made any adjustment really in any of those fights. He kind of just does the same things, and I think it's one of the reasons why he really hasn't been able to get back on the winning track. He's done nothing to really evolve as a fighter. And also, people talk about this, even though he never failed a test before, people mention, well, now with the new testing, maybe he was on something before, and now we can't use that. That could partly be it, too. You got to at least say that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there was that couple punches thrown where I think Ben, luckily missed one of the, ducked for one of those, but it looked heavy. But yeah, I think like you said, a lot of these veteran fighters, they have to evolve with the sport. The sport's changing. People are coming in just more innovative, training differently. Again, new testing, who knows? And I think that if you just don't, accept that and evolve with the sport, you're going to unfortunately, leave the UFC on a rougher skid there. But I don't know, where is he at right now as far as his record?
His overall career record?
Or just like, where is he at?
His career record's still like pretty good even with these losses. But like I said,
but is he on like
he's on a 3-fight losing streak.
Okay.
His overall record's 31-14. But like I said, he's only won 4 fights in the last 6 years. You know what I mean? Like and this is a guy who's been pretty active since entering the UFC in 2009. In 2009, that was a fight in September, is the only year where he only fought once for the UFC. Twice in 2010, 3 times in 2011, 3 times in 2012, twice in 2013, twice in 2014, 2 in 2015, 3 in 2016. Oh, in April last year, he only fought once. So this was his first fight in the year. That was following the knockout against Mike Perry. So obviously he took some time off, and it still didn't seem to matter. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a guy that gets cut. It just doesn't seem.
The problem is,
like I said, it just doesn't seem like he has that drive anymore. It's not the same guy.
If he does get cut and tries to move over to a different promotion, I mean, the division that he's in, a lot of these promotions have divisions that they have these top contenders that are just as stacked as the UFC's welterweight. So I don't know. Yeah,
we'll see. I think it's something he has to sit down and realize if he still wants to do this, because this is a guy who's now 34, 35 years old. Obviously in the UFC, he's been doing this for 9 years and obviously fought before that. So he's been doing MMA for over 10 years professionally. And usually I tell you this all the time, Kayla, that 9-year rule, when you hit 9 years in MMA, that's when you see a lot of guys starting to decline. So testing or anything else aside, he's been in the game for a while, and that's usually when guys' skills start to decline. So it's not a huge, surprise that he's declining, but I think it's a surprise that he's declining this hard.
Yeah.
And like I said, big win for Ben Saunders, because that snaps a 2-fight losing streak that Ben had. So kind of almost a situation where the loser may have got cut. So that was a big win for him. Not to say he for sure would have got cut, but if he would have got knocked out, that would have been not only 3 losses in a row, but 3 knockout losses in a row, and that never looks good.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the next fight on the card: Walt Harris against Daniel Spitz. What can you say about Walt Harris? This guy is a tremendous boxer. If you're going to stand with Walt Harris, I feel like this is what's going to happen to you. I mean, obviously he had that fight against Fabricio Verdum. He took on short notice. No surprise, okay? Fabricio Verdum is world-class Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. You know what I mean? Walt Harris wasn't going to be able to do much in that fight. Short notice, full camp. Next fight was looking good, but of course there was that weird late kick stoppage thing with Mark Godbeer. Unfortunate, stuff happens. So you can say, oh, well, he's on a 2-fight losing streak. But realistically, again, who he took on in that first fight and the Godbeer thing, I hope gets run back at some point because he was looking good up until that just unfortunate disqualification. And Daniel Smith is a guy I thought may give him a little bit of trouble because he's not a typical heavyweight. He's very long, kind of lanky, very fast. And I thought maybe that might give Walt Harris some trouble. It didn't give him any trouble at all. I mean, he was able to, I thought his movement looked good. His combinations looked good. And he pretty much shut down Daniel Spitz. And of course, you could say, well, Spitz broke his arm blocking a kick. Hey, that's the nature of the beast, man. Walt Harris is a big dude. He's going to hit you hard. And that's what happens when you take one of those big shots. And yeah, that probably hurt his performance, but Walt Harris didn't let up on the gas. He didn't go, well, I'm going to slow back. No, he went in for the kill, and he got it. And I thought this was a very nice bounce-back win for him, and this shows that he's a legit threat standing up. If he can round out that grappling part of his game, Kayla, this is a scary guy. I know he looks big, but he's athletic. This is a guy who I believe they said was a college basketball player. This guy definitely has footwork. He has endurance. He's a guy I think is a legitimate heavyweight prospect. And he's a likable guy too. I really like Walt Harris.
Yeah, no, I do too. And I was gonna say he's young, but he's actually 34.
Right, he's young in the sport of MMA.
Right, yeah. But like you said, very athletic. Again, just really nice to actually see him, finish a fight and go through a fight showing those skills. Because like you said, we had that one funky disqualification. But yeah, I agree. I think he looked really good. And it's always nice to get some exciting new players in that division.
What do you think about him taking on Big Pretty for his next fight?
Big who?
Big Pretty. I think it's Justin Willis.
I'm not as
Remember he
familiar
fought Chase Sherman on the Atlantic City card?
Yes. Let me look him up.
He has the tattoo of the chain around his neck.
Yeah.
What do you think about that one? I think that'd be a good matchup.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. And let me see. I like that. I like their nicknames, Big Gritty. And Big Gritty, he's more of a stystand-up guy as well?
Oh yeah, he's ducking his head and throwing that overhand right. So I think stylistically it would make for a very entertaining fight. And obviously you got to look at the height difference too. Walt Harris is like 6'4", 6'5". Big Pretty's only like 6 foot. So I think from that standpoint it make for an also intriguing fight too.
Well, there you go.
We'll see though. I don't know. I think that's the fight to make. But all right, let's get to that co-main event. Gregor Gillespie against Vince Pichel. This is pretty much what I expected. I mean, Vince Pichel's a tough guy, but Gregor Gillespie is a next-level grappler. I mean, this guy is a Division All-American Division I wrestler and a national champion on top of that. And if it wasn't for a guy by the name of Jordan Burroughs, who if anyone follows Olympic wrestling knows, he's maybe the greatest American wrestler of all time, he probably would be an Olympic medalist, Kayla. You know what I mean? Like, that's a hard guy to have in your same weight class. So you could see why he didn't make the Olympic team, having someone like that at the same spot. But with that aside, you added the way he's adapted to the sport, adding in some great jiu-jitsu, adding in great footwork, head movement. I think his striking is on point too. This guy, great conditioning. He's kind of the total package, to be honest. So far, I really haven't seen anyone threaten him, really put him in bad spots, really do something that Gregor didn't look good in that situation. No, he's beaten everybody. He's beaten them soundly. He's put them away. And the crazy thing is, because the lightweight division, always a stacked division, maybe no more stacked than it is right now, Gregor Gillespie is a guy who I think kind of goes under the radar, but I think it's time for him to take that next step in competition because, yeah, Vince Pichel's a tough guy. He didn't give up, but I knew it was going to be a point where he just couldn't handle that pace, and it came towards the end of the second round, which is exactly what I predicted. I thought he'd get a submission, end of the second round, early or third, and that's exactly what he did, and he set that up beautifully with the arm triangle choke. I mean, I don't know what more to say about this guy. He's very impressive, and he's he always talks about fishing. He's a very respectful guy. I think a very humble guy too. But he is an absolute animal when he gets inside the cage.
Yeah, he's really living up to the hype. I'm fully on, the Gregor Gillespie hype train now. I think, like you said, he's just adapting to the sport so well, and he's clearly putting in the work. Each time that we see a performance from him, he looks like he's evolving more to the sport. He wants to have fun and show everything that he's working on. I think you're right. I think it's time for him to take, a bigger name, because I think he really can actually be up there with the contenders and give them a good fight.
Absolutely, and the only way to find out if he's real is to put him against someone that's for real. That's
Who
really
would
the
you
only
have
way
him
about
fight?
it.
Who
Uh,
would you match him with?
oh, a lot of the top guys are booked coming up, so that's where I'm struggling. Is just who do I? There are guys I would like to see him against, but like I think he'd be a great matchup against Michael Chiesa. But I know Michael Chiesa has Anthony Pettis coming up. You know what I mean? Like I also think I'm not sure if technically he's in the rankings anymore, but I think him against Beneil Dariush would be an incredible matchup, especially Dariush is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think that'd be an incredible matchup. I know he's coming off a loss, but I think because he's lost two in a row, even though the two of the top guys in the division, I think him against Edson Barboza would be in a tremendous matchup as well. So those are some of the guys I would kind of like. And I wouldn't even be opposed to a guy who fought on the same card who also has 5 or 6 wins in a row in the UFC lightweight division. A guy by the name of David Tamar. I wouldn't even be opposed to that because I think it'd be the first time Tamar would really get tested with a guy who would try to take him down.
And two guys that are just have some really great momentum going with them. You know that they're going to both put on a good fight against each
Exactly.
other.
All right, let's get to this main event, Kayla. I will say I got the main event right, so I'm not surprised from that standpoint, but I'm surprised at how it happened because Jimmy Rivera had only lost one professional fight in his whole entire career. It was by decision. It was his second ever fight in mixed martial arts. Since then, he's beaten everybody. Hasn't really been, and so he's never been finished in a fight. Now, against Marlon Moraes, one of the reasons I picked him is because of that finishing ability. Jimmy Rivera, great fighter for even though he's a smaller fighter, great fighter at controlling range. Case in point, watch his fight against Uriah Faber, and really the fight against Almeida as well. And not just with striking, but also setting up his takedowns where he's at his best, taking guys down, holding them there. And I think he has good conditioning, has good footwork, but lacks a little bit of that finishing ability. Marlon Moraes doesn't lack that finishing ability. This is a guy who's an absolute killer, a guy who we've seen go 25 minutes back in World Series of Fighting, so he'd be no stranger to fighting 25 minutes. And I think after that UFC jitters, fighting in his home country in Brazil for the first time in a long time against Rafael Sunciao, I think he's gotten over that now. And to me, the last few fights, we've seen the real Marlon Moraes. We've seen the guy that was just dominating people in World Series of Fighting. And I think he's now really starting to hit his stride in the UFC. I think no better than this fight against Jimmy Rivera, where, again, he's known for his kicks, and that's what he did. He was able to catch that head kick and didn't let Jimmy Rivera recover, and that's just what Marlon Moraes can do. He's so fast. His kicks come so hard. Doesn't matter if they're to the legs, to the body, or to the head. If you get hit one of those things, you're going to feel it, and he can just snap them all day. And if that one didn't land, he was going to try again, and that's just what he can do to you. And given over 25 minutes, it's easy to see he probably could have landed one of those eventually. And obviously he's training with, I think, one of the best minds in mixed martial arts there in Mark Henry and his team with Frankie Edgar and Edson Barboza and Eddie Alvarez and, all those guys, Ricardo Almeida over there in New Jersey. And I think he's really taken that in. He's just a fantastic striker. And very few people, I think, really want to stand with this guy. And I think Jimmy Rivera learned that the hard way on Friday night.
Yeah, and it came out later too that specific kick he drilled over 10,000 times, I think he said. Um, so that he was waiting for an opening. I'm sure that wasn't even the only kick or only thing he has in his arsenal, but he saw that opening early, and unfortunately we didn't get to see these guys battle. But this is how you make a big statement, taking out a guy that was on a 20 fight win streak since 2008, I think.
Yeah, it's something like that.
That's how you steal a show. I mean, it felt very similar to, the Brian Ortega versus Frankie Edgar. just, really taking that guy's shine and making your name and I guess cementing yourself. Do you think that, I think he said he's mentioned he just wants to sit back, take a break, and wait for that next title shot. Do you think that's the move for him?
Yeah, I think he deserves it. I think he deserves the winner of TJ versus Cody. I really do. The only other fight I could see him realistically taking would be Dominic Cruz. But who knows with Dominic Cruz? I mean, this is a guy who, I don't know, even though he's now been healthier, he's hurt again, and also doesn't really seem to be in a hurry to fight. Of course, he was supposed to fight Jimmy Rivera last December. He got hurt, and we haven't heard from him other than the commentating, which is fine. But I feel like he's a guy that's been in it for a while. He's had hurt. He was able to come back, win the title. I almost feel like Dominic Cruz is mentally, he doesn't have that same drive anymore. He's kind of like, I've already done it. I proved I could come back. I don't think he's really that worried about fighting because he's had a lot of opportunity to fight and he hasn't. And then you add in now getting hurt again. I hate to say he's a non-factor. I wouldn't say that, but it's, out of sight, out of mind. This dude's only fought once in the last 18 months. It's hard for me to say, like, he should get the next title shot when you have guys like Marlon Moraes knocking out Aljamain Sterling, beating John Dodson and knocking out Jimmy Rivera.
I did read that he was interested in Moraes and not Sterling, but since this fight night, I haven't heard anything from him. So maybe after he saw that kick, he's like, I'll keep the suit on for a little bit longer.
It really depends. The only thing I could see is if there's a complication between the winner of Cody versus TJ where they have to be out for an extended time. Moraes may be forced to take a fight just so he can stay active. So that's what I would say. He has to at least sit back, see how that fight plays out, then he can make his next decision. But to me, the only fight, if I was Marlon Moraes, I would be interested in would be Dominic Cruz.
For sure.
All right. Let's get a little bit to, what was I going to talk about here? Oh, Glory 54, for anyone joining us from MMA UFK. Of course, it was in England for the first time in 5 years, in Birmingham, England, for Glory 54. Main card was shown on ESPN News. I think it's only the second time since they've signed with ESPN that a main card was shown actual live. So that was cool. That's something. As far as the fights, though, Kayla, I don't know. I'd have to go back through the history of Glory, but since I've been watching, which is right around Glory 24, 25 or so, all fights on the Super Fight Series as well as the main card were all decisions. I've never seen that before. Not one finish. That's insane. With 11 kickboxing fights, that all of them were decision. I've never seen that before. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I started to watch, but then I was called into a work outing, and I did notice that the fights were taking a little bit longer. I was looking to see, just because you got us so hyped up for some of these exciting performances. But maybe it's just, do you think it was the level of competition? I know you said there was a rematch or two in there too, right?
I mean, yeah, the John C. Baia was a rematch. Josh Johnsey ended up winning. That was a fantastic fight. And here's another thing, Kayla. No one even got knocked down. Like, that's probably even more incredible than the no finishes, that there were no even knockdowns. So that's not to say every fight was boring. There were definitely some entertaining fights. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. So what was the fight I was watching? Hang on. Which fight was it? Oh, you know what? Actually, hang on. There was a fight. Okay, this doesn't count technically as a finish. It counted as a no contest. I forgot. Ulanov against Brian Sudden actually got called a no contest due to a cut from an accidental headbutt. But that doesn't count. That one doesn't count. So
that was
so that one didn't go 3 rounds, but there was no winner. And Sugden's the guy, if you don't know him, he has the tattoo of Iron Man's armored arm on his right arm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So was there anybody that you were impressed with as far as just the
I mean, Rico Verhoeven does what Rico Verhoeven does. I mean, he's the king of kickboxing for a reason. I mean, he beats Milan Brestovic again. wipes him out 5-0 again. Let's just get that Badr fight going. He already said his next fight's going to be at the huge stadium there in the Netherlands at the end of September. So if you're going to a really big stadium in the Netherlands, you got to have a really big fight. So what's bigger than Rico Badr 2, right? I mean, I don't see anyone else besides Badr is a really interesting fight for Rico Verhoeven right now.
I wanted to ask you, I think they said they were doing like something like different or unique with the judging as far as showing
Yes,
scores.
they have. They've been doing this for the last couple events, and this is something MMA should adopt. It's the live scoring. They actually show you the actual judges' scores after the round. And yes, absolutely. There should be no way that you have a mystery at the end. Wouldn't it be nice to know going into in between the second and third round, Kayla, that your corner knows exactly what the score is? Knowing, okay, you're down 2 rounds. You got to go for it here, bro. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's a big difference to be like, well, it could be 1-1, this and that. You know what I mean? Like, if you know for a fact that you're down, I think that changes a lot. And also it changes if you're up, if you know you're up 2 rounds. You know what I mean? So, because you know the other guy, like, well, if I'm up 2 rounds, this guy's going to be gunning for me. You know what I mean? So I think it's just little things like that. And sure, there's still some mystery because obviously they still wait till the end of the 3rd round to announce who wins. So there's still some mystery and intrigue, but at least you kind of know where the fight's actually going. I love that. And Ray, yeah, kickboxing's been doing it. At least Gloria, I can't attest to every organization. And also I like the fact they used 5 judges. I think if there's 1 or 2, if you got an Adelaide Bird in there, something like that, it kind of helps outweigh maybe anybody looking at it weird because you got those 2 other voices. And so to get a majority, you got to have 3 instead of 2. And I also think that might help MMA. Maybe that's one step at a time, but I think live scoring for sure should be out there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think that would be, the only thing is I think they'd have to get a security guard for some of the judges or possibly bring in some new judging because I could see some fights breaking out if a corner sees that a judge is scoring, I don't know, controversial points for their team mid-fight.
Yes and no, but I think you're so focused on the fight, I don't think you're going to run over to the judge. I don't know. But speaking of Glory, again, I thought overall still a fight card worth watching. A good fight. I really liked the fight between Nabiev and Grigorian for the welterweight title. Nabiev had a few moments, but Grigorian with his power, he was still able to last 25 minutes. And even though you could tell he was looking tired, not a guy typically accustomed really even fighting the 3-minute rounds in Glory, I thought held up well for his first title defense. So very impressed by Grigorian. I'm really, he's a hard guy not to like. And for Nabiev, even though he lost, still definitely a guy that proved he's one of the best in the world, that the wins against Doumbé and Nicky Holtzkin were not flukes. So I thought that was a good fight. And also Glory announced their next 5 fights, Kayla, what they're calling the Summer of Glory 2018. It's going to start July 20th at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden for Glory 55. Then August 10th, they're going to go to Denver at the First Bake Center. August 25th, they return to China, and they're going to go to Shenzhen, China on August 25th. Then September 15th, they hit back up Chicago at the Sears Center Arena. I plan on going to that one, so I should be there. And then, like I said, the big one, the end of September, Glory 59 Amsterdam at the huge Johan Cruijff Arena, which has already been told we're going to see Rico Verhoeven against 2. We don't know, probably Badr Hari. But that's going to be probably the crown jewel of these next 5 fights. And I really like the fact that they've said these next 5 fights, and I'm really looking forward to them. And Glory 55 has already had some of their fights announced, including the middleweight championship on the line. Alex Pereira is going to take on Yosef Bulgari. Super excited for that one. And former lightweight champion, obviously now the featherweight champion, Robin van Roosmalen will take on Kiyomoto for the featherweight championship as well. So far that's what's been announced, but that already looks like a really good card for Glory 55.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So, all right, a little bit something I want to talk about, Kayla, before I let you go here is, of course, the Professional Fighter League, PFL, formerly known as World Series of Fighting, will be having their first ever event tonight on NBC Sports. They're also going to show their preliminary fights on Facebook. So look out for those two streaming live at Facebook Live. Speaking of the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden, that's where those fights are going to take place. 11 fights overall for the card. It's going to feature a lot of names people probably have heard of. A couple of the preliminary fights: Francis Barbozo, former UFC fighter; Steven Siler, former UFC fighter. We got Marcus Galvo, former Bellator champion, on the card. Former UFC fighter Jared Rosholt is on the card. Former UFC fighter Alex Nicholson is on the card. We're also going to have former World Series of Fighting champion Lance Palmer will be fighting on the card, as well as a guy who has gotten a lot of hype lately. The 17-0 Andre Harrison will also be on the card in the main event as he takes on Turuxin Jambiki, if I said that name correctly. Difficult name to pronounce, but a lot of names people will recognize on the NBC Sports broadcast as well as the Facebook prelims, and we'll see what happens with World Series of Fighting. Obviously, or World Series of Fighting. Well, formerly World Series of Fighting. Obviously, one of the reasons World Series of Fighting kind of had to adjust is I always thought that they were paying way too much for the few top names that they have, and that really cost them as far as the developing talent, and that's one of the reasons why I think they kind of had to kind of repackage how they were doing things. And so having this kind of season format, I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out. I'm interested. It's innovative. It's different. It's not quite what the Bellator was doing before. It's not quite what the UFC is doing. And in this day and age, you always got to do it's a show me lately, or what have you done for me lately type of really world, not just sport. And we'll see if this pays off for Professional Fighters League. We'll see how it works out. I'm definitely intrigued. I'll definitely, if I'm not watching live, I'll have it DVR'd. I'm definitely going to watch it in some capacity.
Yeah, I think when they announced this last year, people, Twitter, media, everyone kind of was laughing at the idea, saying it's someone's tried it before, it's not going to work out. But I think that the way that they've packaged it, like you said, it has us interested. So we just have to see how it plays out. They've definitely, collected some names to pull in some draw, a great broadcast team. So, I'm very intrigued just to see the first, fight night play out, and we'll see. I think that, like you said, it's innovative, and it seems like a lot of these promotions are trying to bring back a tournament style or throw in some sort of unique setup just to try something new. So why not?
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. Like I said, a lot of names people should have heard of. Of course, they're going to have a lot of new names we haven't heard of as well. So I definitely think it's intriguing. And I think our very own Carrie Steller is actually going to be at the fights there at the theater at Madison Square Garden. So look out for updates from Carrie on her personal pages as well as the MMA UK page. So she'll be there in attendance, taking this one in from press junket area. So I'm excited for that. Is there anyone in particular, kind of looking over this card, Kayla, you were like, oh, we get to see this guy or we get to see that guy? Or was there anyone that you kind of had your eye on?
This specific card, let me see. Well, while I look over, who are you excited to see?
Honestly, it's going to sound weird, but Alex Nicholson. The reason I say that is because this is a guy who actually was in the UFC for a little bit. And in the UFC, he went 1-3, but he fought at his debut was at 205 pounds. He lost to Misha Serkinov. Not a bad loss there, right? It was a short notice sort of thing. He moves down to 185. He has a nice knockout victory over Devin Clark, and then loses to Sam Alvey again. Not a bad loss. And then he got knocked out by Jack Hermanson. Now, all of a sudden, Kayla, this dude's fighting at heavyweight. And he's won 3 out of his last 4 fights, including a win over former UFC champion Rico Rodriguez, who I didn't even know was still fighting. So I don't know. I'm intrigued. And 4 of those 5 fights, all those fights have not gone the distance. He's won 4. The 4 wins are all by finish with 3 knockouts, including a submission win over Rico Rodriguez. And his last fight was for that weird Cam Soda Legends thing that they have. I don't know if you heard about that. It's the it's Cam Soda is the how do I put this? Like, the cam girls thing. You view the girl and they do the thing and you pay the money.
Yeah.
It's like that's what the website's for. But now they have their own like fighting promotion and it's on that website. And so he fought for that. That's what I mean. He fought Rico Rodriguez, the former UFC champion, on a adult entertainment website. You know how the mighty have fallen, right? If you would have told Rico Rodriguez when he was UFC champion that one day you're going to be fighting on a online adult entertainment site company venue, you think he'd say you're crazy?
The audience was probably pretty large, though. I hear that is a very profitable business.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying it's a weird thing to put cage fighting on.
For sure.
And it's a weird thing for Rico Rodriguez to be involved in, but so that's why I'm intrigued to see Alex Nicholson, because again, this was a guy who was at 185, is now at heavyweight, and has looked pretty good as of late. You know, Cam Soda legends aside. So I'm interested to see how he does against Jay Kuhn, another guy that's a guy who's been around the block. He's been with World Series of Fighting before. Definitely a guy I always thought was kind of like a legit heavyweight. So I'm intrigued by that matchup. And they both have similar records: 11-6 for Kuhn, 11-5 for Nicholson.
Yeah, for sure. There's the name that pops out to me because I remember researching some of the fighters on the PFL roster, and I can't get his full background right now, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, so please save me. Bekbulat Gomedov.
Okay, I think wasn't he the World Series of Fighting like flyweight champion?
I need to get his. Let me see if I can find more information. But I remember reading about him. He's young, 19-1. Let me see.
Oh, I see who you're talking about. He's the guy taking on Lance Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, okay. He wasn't their flyweight champ. I'm thinking of a different Russian guy. But no, the interesting thing will be how he actually finished his career as the World Series of Fighting bantamweight champion, because obviously Moraes had left, so he beat Donovan Freelo. So he actually ended. That was March of last year. So it'll be interesting to see how he does, moving up to 45 and obviously taking on the guy in Lance Palmer, former Ohio State All-American, Team Alpha male representative, former featherweight champion in World Series of Fighting. It'll be interesting to see how he deals, moving up the 10 pounds.
Yeah, he was definitely a name that I was interested to see him fight. And there's a few guys. I actually didn't realize that it was tonight.
I think that's a good move by them, putting it on a Thursday.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought it up. I'm definitely going to tune in because I'm excited to see.
And real quickly, we saw a comment from Ray. No, I don't need any updates from the two fights, though. I appreciate you offering the updates, though, Ray. And yeah, we'll see how PFL 1 goes, but that's awesome. You'll get to see PFL 2 in Chicago as well. So we'll see if we can get Caleb back on. If not, she froze out. So once again, that was Kayla Beatty. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at fangirl_MMA. Again, thanks to Kayla for joining me once again for another live. However, stay tuned. Stay where you're at. Don't go anywhere. I still got to talk about UFC 225, so don't worry. You still got more Beyond the Cage coming. Don't worry, people. Looking at UFC 225 again, as our friend Ray was saying, it's in Chicago IL at the United Center for UFC 225. 13 bouts officially scheduled for the card. A lot of big names on this card. We got Sergio Pettis versus Joseph Benavidez. That, believe it or not, people, is going to be on Fight Pass. We also have Clay Guida against Charles Oliveira. That is on Fight Pass. And we also have another former world champion, Rashad Evans, taking on Anthony Smith. This is going to be at 205 pounds. That is actually on Fight Pass. Man, I think that's a stacked fight. That's as stacked as a Fight Pass part of the card I think as I've ever seen. Maybe going back to like UFC 200. Stacked. early prelims for UFC Fight Pass. Then we get to the FS1 prelims, starting at 8 p.m. We're going to get Ricardo Lamas against Mirsad Bektic in the featherweight division. We're going to get former world champion Carla Esparza against Claudia Gadelha. This is huge. This is a fight that should have happened years ago in Invicta when both were still fighting for Invicta. Obviously, Carla Esparza was the former Invicta 115-pound champion. And finally, after all these years, they're finally going to meet here at UFC 225. That's a huge fight in the strawweight division. Gadelha is ranked 3rd, Carla Esparza ranked number 6. And then, of course, it's highlighted in the heavyweight division by former Pride standout, as well as K1 kickboxer, Dream and Strikeforce heavyweight champion Alistair Overeem is going to take on Curtis Blades in the heavyweight division. Of course, you kind of have the old school with Alistair Overeem against the new school and Curtis Blades. That's going to be a fantastic fight, so that's ending the FS1 prelims. And then we get to the main card, which is what I'm going to preview and, of course, pick the main card fights here for UFC 225. It's kicking off in the welterweight division as former WWE wrestler is making his second attempt at mixed martial arts. That's going to be one Mr. CM Punk, a.k.a. Phil Brooks, as he takes on Mike Jackson. Both are actually 0-1 in their professional careers, so I don't know a lot about Mr. Mike Jackson. He obviously is 0-1, much like his counterpart CM Punk. The one fight that he had was actually in the UFC. He actually fought on short notice against Mickey Gall. So they have that in common, that they both lost to Mickey Gall. The choke was even quicker for Mr. Jackson, losing to Mickey Gall in about 45 seconds, whereas CM Punk lasted a little bit there. He also did take a professional Muay Thai bout for an organization called XKO in January of last year, which he lost. And then he was supposed to fight for Legacy in August of last year against Rafael Justino. That was at LFA 18. That bout fell through. So he has not competed in a mixed martial arts bout since February of 2016. So I think that's all good signs for CM Punk. The reason I say that is because even though Mickey Gall only had 2 fights before that, Mickey Gall was a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, okay? Has been training Jiu-Jitsu for more years than CM Punk's just been training. So that was going to be a very difficult fight for CM Punk. And this time around, obviously he's going to have more training put in. He had a little over a year the first time around for the Mickey Gall fight, which was in September of 2016. So he's had about another 18 months to train. Altogether, that's probably 36 to 40 months or so worth of mixed martial arts training. He's obviously taken on a guy in Mike Jackson who, despite making his amateur MMA debut in 2012, has kind of gone from fighting to not fighting to doing Muay Thai and kickboxing. And so I think that's going to help CM Punk a lot, taking on a guy that's pretty much actually at the same level. And so the thing about CM Punk was, because he was taking on a guy I think that was so much more skilled than him, it was really hard to see what he actually brings to the table. And that's Kayla commenting down below. Her phone died, but she'll see you next week. Again, thanks, Kayla. Again, that's fangirl_MMA on Twitter and Instagram to keep up with what Kayla's doing. So it's intriguing. I'm a little surprised they're actually kicking off the card with it, but this fight's a complete unknown because we just don't know. Both guys just weren't as skilled as Mickey Gall, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't know. We'll see what happens come the second professional fight for one Mr. CM Punk. Next fight of the evening is in the heavyweight division. Andrei Arlovski against Tai Tuivasa. I'm going to be honest. Andrei Arlovski in his last couple fights, really hasn't looked particularly well. He had the win over Junior Albini. He beat Stefan Struve. He got beat up by, and before that, even though he's out of 2-fight losing streak, before that he had lost, 5 in a row. But, he got knocked out against Stipe, knocked out against Overeem, submitted against Barnett, knocked out by Ngannou, look bad in his decision loss against Tybura. Didn't really look that great against Junior Albini. Didn't really look that good against Stefan Struve, to be honest. And now he's taking on Tuivasa, who's going to be a lot bigger, a lot stronger than him. He's young, he's hungry. He obviously trains with Mark Hunt. He's one of Mark Hunt's big sparring partners. And a guy that, undefeated in mixed martial arts. The only loss I can see of any notable thing was actually a kickboxing bout to Ismail Lazar. And Lazar is a guy who actually fought Rico Verhoeven not that long ago, so that's not even a bad loss. But this is a guy who is 9-0 and has won every single fight by knockout. He's finished everybody that's been put in front of him. In fact, two of the fights I can't tell, but it looks as though he's never even been to the second round. I mean, this guy has scary power. And at this stage in his career, Arlovski's already had a history of kind of being a little chinny. And you add in, now being, let's see, he's 39 years old. Good luck to him. You know what? If he can move in and out, maybe if he can get this thing into the second, maybe we can actually see if Tuivasa has any sort of conditioning. That's maybe Arlovski's only hope. But if he can't weather that early storm, he's gonna get knocked out again. And again, I said he probably should have hung it up after the Tybura fight. He's fought twice since then. If he gets knocked out bad by Tuivasa, which is kind of my inclination of what's going to happen, just call it a career, man. You got nothing left to prove. You're the former world champion. You're a certified Hall of Famer. You got nothing left to prove, man. You fought over 40 times professionally. You're 39. You don't need to be taking more hits. I'll just say that. Next fight of the evening in the women's featherweight division, Holly Holm against Megan Anderson. This is actually the first non-title women's featherweight fight in UFC history, so kind of a big deal. Of course, Holly Holm, her last fight, she actually challenged for the featherweight championship and was unsuccessful, getting pretty much whitewashed by Chris Cyborg in 5 rounds. And she's now taking on Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson actually was supposed to take on Chris Cyborg back in July of last year. I think that's when Tanya Evinger ended up filling. Anderson is a former Invicta champion. Technically, it was for the interim title when she knocked out Charmaine Tweet in January of last year. However, was promoted, I believe, to actual champion in the absence of Cyborg. Was actually supposed to defend the title again in July of last year on Invicta 24. But of course, when she signed with the UFC, that got promoted. Couldn't make that bout. And kind of since then, I think she had some injury problems. There was also some visa issues. But finally is going to fight in the UFC. And I'm okay with it not being Chris Cyborg because it's been over a year since we've seen Megan Anderson. She took on Charmaine Tweet, who, not saying she's horrible, but definitely someone who's, kind of a gatekeeper of sorts. And so I think taking on Holly Holm is a legitimate fight, and I think kind of needed because if they're going to try to actually have this be a division and not just Chris Cyborg basically fighting one-off fight, they need to help build it up. So I'm glad we're actually finally seeing a non-title featherweight bout. The biggest thing I would see is with Holly Holm, obviously being able to fight at 35 and 45, is really her speed, her in and out movement, her overall output. We'll have to see what Megan Anderson deals with that because I can say that for a fact. Looking back in her career, dating back to 2013, she's never faced anybody like Holly Holm. She's never faced anybody with this level of striking, with this level of speed, with this level of technique and strategy. And even though Megan Anderson's going to be bigger, she's going to be stronger, I don't think she's going to be faster. And also, again, maybe a little rusty. And she's taking on somebody who I think is a very hard girl to game plan for. So while, yes, Megan Anderson has a puncher's chance, again, Holly just went 25 minutes with Cyborg and didn't get knocked out. And Cyborg hits really hard, too. So I actually do find it hard to believe that, you would like to think Holly can take the punches of Megan Anderson. And again, she only has to do it for 15 minutes, so in 25. We'll see where she's at, but this is going to be a very difficult fight for Megan Anderson. Obviously, fighting Cyborg's equally as tough, but you add in the layoff and just the type of skills she's taken on before. She's never seen anybody quite like Holly Holm. So this is going to be a very interesting fight. But I'm glad we get to see Megan Anderson in the UFC because I do like Megan Anderson. I think she is an exciting prospect for a division that doesn't have a lot of young up-and-coming fighters. So I really like to see what she brings to the table and what she's been working on to see how her game has changed in the past year, and obviously taking on a very good fighter in her own right in Holly Holm. Gavin Brown, Absolute Nerds reporting fight news. Gimps. I'm not sure if you're calling me a fight nerd. That's fine, but I'm not sure what the comments there. But thanks for watching, though, Gavin. All right, let's get to the co-main event of the evening. Rafael dos Anjos against Colby Covington. Very interesting fight. I say that because Rafael dos Anjos, so far the size has not been an issue for him. So far moving up to 170 where I thought he'd have a tough time dealing with big guys, hasn't really fazed him. I mean, he obviously had a little bit of a difficulty in his first fight there against Tarek Saffiedine. Saffiedine's a tough guy. He's the sponge, first fight. And that was in Singapore. I'm sure it was very hot and humid there too. But after that, I mean, Neil Magny's way bigger than Rafael dos Anjos. He ran through him in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And then Robbie Lawler, a guy who's an absolute savage. We all know the toughness of Robbie Lawler. And dos Anjos carved him up for 25 minutes. So size has not so far been a factor. A guy that has legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt skills, has developed into a really good striker. And I think the fact that now he doesn't have to cut that extra weight, you can really see his output go up there. Now, he's not going to have that one-shot knockout power that he showed a few times at 55, knock out the lights of Ben Henderson, as well as Donald Cerrone. But he's going to be able to put an output out there that very few, if any, welterweights in the UFC can match. And also, because he fought at 55, he's going to be faster than these welterweights. However, he's taking on a very big and strong wrestler in Colby Covington, who took on Damian Maia, obviously another very skilled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in his last fight, and was able pretty much to dismantle the two-time title challenger in a 3-round decision last October. So, however, Rafael dos Anjos has way better striking than Damian Maia. I think the key in this fight is whether or not Covington can get this to the ground, and if he does, will he be able to stifle the submissions of Rafael dos Anjos? Also, because Covington is going to be the bigger guy, how will he deal with 25 minutes? I'm looking at his record here. He's never been scheduled for a 5-round fight before. Has been to quite a few decisions in his career, so he's no stranger to going a full 15 minutes, but he's never been 25 before. I think that should be an interesting. And obviously, not only that, dos Anjos is a former champion. He has that championship experience, so fighting for a title, 25 minutes, no problem. All the attention and hype, that's no problem to him. He's done all that before. So, striking-wise, I would say dos Anjos is the better striker. Nothing so far in Covington's game has really showed me that he's developed to become an elite-level striker. And the longer it stays standing, I have to favor Rafael dos Anjos. When it goes to the ground, that's where we don't know. Because even though dos Anjos, I wouldn't say necessarily is like amazing takedown defense, I would say that he probably feels pretty comfortable off his back because of that jiu-jitsu background. And we'll see how he deals with that pressure, because Covington's definitely going to try to push him up against the cage, make dos Anjos carry that weight for as long as he can and as much as he can. And so that's one thing that's going to happen. But I think if it stays at range, dos Anjos can keep that range, use that speed. I think Covington's going to have a hard time trying to trade with Rafael dos Anjos. I really do. And it's really going to be a matter of, can Covington get the fight to the ground? Can he stay on top? And can he stay on top and not get caught in a submission? All right, let's get to the main event of the evening, a rematch between these two. Robert Whitaker and Yoel Romero going at each other for the second time. The last time it was for the interim middleweight championship of the world. That was in July of last year, so a little less than a year ago. That was the last fight for now current champion Robert Whitaker, who was promoted to actual middleweight champion after it was vacated by George St. Pierre following his victory over Michael Bisping. Romero, since that fight, only fought once, but he did so in very impressive fashion, knocking out former middleweight champion Luke Rockhold earlier this year at UFC 221 in the third round. But of course, he did miss weight for that fight. So of course, and once again, he's actually going to miss the opening workouts, which are there today. He's cited due to an eye issue, but could it be a weight issue? We don't know. So that's something we got to look at, too, as a possibility of whether or not weight will once again be a factor. One of the reasons a lot of people were discrediting missing by 2.7 pounds in his fight against Luke Rockhold was the fact that he took the fight on short notice. But by short notice, it was still 5 weeks. So we'll see. I think it's something you got to question. And obviously, being such a big guy, weight has kind of always been a factor. However, as far as I can tell, that's the only time that he's missed weight in his career, and the only time he's missed weight in the UFC, which dates back to 2013 when he debuted against Clifford Starks. So, this is not a guy, as much as you want to say, he cuts a lot of weight, not a guy that typically has missed weight. So, as much as I don't think it's going to be as big a factor as people think, and I think if Yoel Romero has an issue with his eye, I think that is also legitimate as well. Really, the question of this fight is going to be, how will Yoel Romero do with, again, fighting at 25 minutes? Because after the first 2 rounds in this fight against Robert Whittaker, there was a noticeable difference in conditioning and endurance. And that's when Robert Whittaker, a guy, again, who used to fight at 170 pounds, he was able to take over. He had more energy. He was able to stuff those takedowns. He's also probably a little better he's also a better technical striker. He was able to win those striking exchanges. And really, he was also able to avoid getting hit with anything ridiculously big. And obviously, the fact Romero wasn't even throwing combinations, it was easy for him to avoid some of those big shots because they weren't coming. Romero was just kind of looking for that one big moment, and then just kind of that 1 or 2 explosive rushes. Whittaker was able to sidestep a lot of them, counter, stop the takedown, and in my opinion, one of the best championship performances I've ever seen in my life. And as good as he fought, again, he's been hurt, he's been out almost a year. Can he do that again? I don't know, because he fought so perfectly the first time. It's hard to say, can he replicate that again? He obviously can do it. He's done it once before. It's possible. It's not impossible for him to beat Yoel Romero a second time. But you got to believe Yoel Romero learned so much from that experience on how to pace himself. And I think that showed in the fight against Luke Rockhold. Even though that thing only went into the middle of the third round, he was a much more calm, cool, collected, composed Yoel Romero. He striked when the opportunity was right, and he knocked the dude out cold. And he certainly has the power to do that to anybody in this division. And I think if that Yoel Romero shows up, looks for the moments for the takedown, picks and chooses them wisely, picks the moments right to explode with his big overhands, he can certainly win this fight. But if he goes too much, too soon, Robert Whittaker, a.k.a. Bobby Knuckles, he's going to walk away with another victory. With that said, let's get to picks here for UFC 225 this Saturday on pay-per-view, 10 in the East, 7 in the West. Kicking off in the welterweight division, CM Punk against Mike Jackson. I'm going to go CM Punk. I think he really wants this win, and I think he's taking on a guy who, I don't know, is at the same level, but has kind of been bouncing around, doing a whole bunch of other things. I don't know if he's as dedicated as what CM Punk has been doing. I'm going to go with CM Punk in this one. Andre Arlovski against Tia Tuivasa. I'm going with Tuivasa in this one. I mean, he's just too big. He's too strong. He's young, hungry. He's looking for kind of that signature win to make him known, and that's kind of what Andre Arlovski has been to a lot of guys. And even though he's won his last 2 fights, I don't think he's looked particularly good, so I'm going to go with Tuivasa in this one. Holly Holm against Megan Anderson. I'm going to go Holly Holm. I think she's going to be able to do the in-and-out movement. I think she's going to be faster than Holly, and I think she's going to hit Holly, or Holly's going to be able to hit Megan a lot more times, get that striking numbers in there. I think it's going to be hard for Anderson to compete with that. Obviously, Anderson definitely has a puncher's chance, but Holm proved that she's a tough cookie. Has never been knocked out in her career, so I'm going to go with Holly Holm in this one. Rafa Dos Anjos against Colby Covington. I've actually picked against Rafa dos Anjos again in every one of his welterweight fights, and I've been proven wrong 3 straight times. So this time around, I'm going to go Rafael dos Anjos. I think he's the better striker. He's going to be quicker, faster. I think he's more accustomed. Even he went 25 minutes a few times at 155, so he's even more accustomed to it at 170. If he can take hits from Lawler, he can take hits from everybody. And yes, I know the wrestling could be a factor, but Dos Anjos is a big deal off his back. I don't think he's going to be forcing the issue for the takedown like Damian Maia. This is a different Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt we're dealing with. We're dealing with a guy who also has really good Muay Thai striking. So I'm going to go with Rafael Dos Anjos in this one. Robert Whittaker against Yoel Romero. Man, this one's so tough to pick. I actually do like both guys. Both guys are extremely talented. I've been a fan of Robert Whittaker ever since winning the Tough Smashes all those years ago in the welterweight division. You know, he had such a great performance last time. I don't know if he can do it again. It's possible he can do it again, but I'm not sure if he can. So I'm going to go with Yoel Romero to become the middleweight champion of the world. So, and thanks for your picks there, Ray, too. It looks like we differ on the last 3. So, again, thanks everybody for watching again. Thanks to Kayla for joining me earlier on. Again, she's Fangirl MMA, Fangirl_MMA on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And of course, like MMA World, like right here on Facebook, facebook.com/MMA World with 2 extra Ds. And of course, our sister page, MMAUK.net, the news outlet that we are back behind. And again, like them on Facebook, facebook.com/MishMartialArtsUK. And at We Are MMA UK on Twitter and Instagram as well. So for Kayla Beatty, I am Jim Graham. Thank you everybody for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage. Goodbye, everybody.